Ben Hodges is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General, where he served in a number of senior level staff positions, including Commander, U.S. Army Europe. Since retiring, he has been a very sought after speaker at international conferences, and he can be heard usually several times a day on podcasts and streaming services all over the internet. He's been on the No Delusion Zone before, and as always, I'm very, very happy to have him back. So, Ben, welcome back to the No Delusion Zone.
Dave, thank you for giving me a chance to come back. I always enjoy it.
Well, I hope so, because I do too. And let's get right to it. I usually joke around with you, but things are really serious right now. Obviously, it's pretty dark times. So I want to talk and probably speak for the majority of our conversation today on the meeting, the meeting at Quantico with the 800 or so senior military leaders and their senior non-commissioned officers. Again, just about a week or so ago in Quantico, Virginia. I know you've been asked about this a lot. I've seen most of your podcast and your writing, but I'm going to ask you just flat out. When you watched that, whether it was live or on a recording, what were your initial reactions?
Well, honestly, I was very proud to see how these hundreds of senior leaders, with all their experiences, deployments, etc., how they behaved. They sat there professionally, respectfully, and quiet, exactly as they should, just the way that the Joint Chiefs and the Supreme Court justices do during the annual State of the Union message. Everybody's seen that, where the Republican members stand up and cheer or the Democrat members stand up and cheer for whatever the president might say. And then the camera always shows the Joint Chiefs and the Chief Justices or the Supreme Court justices sitting there with their hands in their lap to demonstrate that the military and the courts are apolitical. So that's what I thought of when I saw all those women and men sitting there, impressive looking group. And you could look at the chest and imagine how much experience and all that they had gone through. So my big takeaway from that, despite all the things that were said by the president and the Secretary of Defense, was that I am hopeful that the military as an institution is going to remain firm and they're living out their oath to the Constitution. So that gives me some confidence.
I felt the same way, of course, and I'm really glad that they did have the stone stoic faces at the very beginning of the conference when Secretary Hegseth started speaking. Like everyone else, I thought I was watching a remake of Patton, based on the background, and then I thought I was watching a remake of Full Metal Jacket. When he got into, telling the four-star generals, one, two, three, and four-star generals, what it takes to be a lethal military and how to instill discipline in their troops. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. It's been said before, but I was disgusted. I won't speak for you. I was disgusted. I was nauseous. I had to turn the recording off, go away for a while, have a couple of drinks, come back, and then watch it again because it was disgusting. It really was disgusting. And I'm not going to ask you specifically again about opinions about either person. I'm only going to keep this to what they said. Let me flip this. What could or should Secretary Hegseth have said to this group instead of what he did say? What would you have liked him to have said?
Well, of course, a lot has been made of the fact that he required them all to come personally to Quantico, uh, regardless of where they were serving, whether it was Europe, the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, or all around the United States. For years that we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, we managed to have conferences and weekly updates, even to the president, using secure communications. We have an incredible set of communications capabilities. So, was this necessary to do it this way? But let's assume it was. For whatever reason, it had to be done that way. then let's make the most of it. Let's make it really something that all these leaders need to hear personally from the Secretary of Defense, so that they can be more effective in carrying out their job and thinking about what the role of the Secretary of Defense is, where any secretary should be thinking and acting and applying the resources and the authority of their office. At a minimum, I had expected that it would be, hey guys, this is the new global strategy. This is what we're going to do. We are shifting to focus on homeland security and the Western Hemisphere. This is where the threats are, and kind of lay out, talking to them directly, because all those women and men sitting in the auditorium, that's who's going to have to execute whatever the national defense strategy is, what the priorities are. And of course, whenever there's a new defense strategy, you have force posture reviews that are part of it, which mean changes in force structure, headquarters. So if you're going to bring all these guys back, that's the kind of thing useful. I mean, I would have wanted to hear that directly from the secretary. Um, and then, of course, if there were other, you know, department level policy changes that of real substance, I mean, if you've got everybody there, then go ahead and do it. And it is, I mean, to be fair, it's his prerogative to do this. Did he help himself? Did he make the Department of Defense better with what he chose to do versus what he could have done? Yeah, I don't think so.
Well, let me just say, because as you know, I don't care what he thinks about what I say. That was insane. You were a senior level commander, almost as senior as can be in the United States Army. So aside from accomplishing the mission, one of your main responsibilities was for keeping your troops safe, making sure that all of them came home again. I come from a counterintelligence background, and one of the responsibilities is force protection. So I know a little bit about that, and bringing the most senior leadership of the entire United States military into one room was absolutely crazy. Was a security nightmare. I know it's been talked and written about a lot. I don't think it's been focused on enough. This was a counterintelligence nightmare. This was a force protection nightmare. This should have kept many people up at night, and I'm sure it did. Those that know better. This was insane. There was absolutely no reason to bring them all together for the reasons that were stated, for the talk that was given. As you said, there are many secure methods to do this, although I know our secretary doesn't like to use it. He's kind of into signal. But in reality, there are many ways to talk to all of them if they all had to be talked to at the same time, using secure and remote communication. So I'm not going to beat that to death, but I just couldn't believe that. And then, like you, I thought, okay, if he's going to do this, it's got to be something really drastic where he's going to call them all up on the stage one by one and have them put up their hand to swear allegiance to Donald Trump. Thank God that didn't happen, or something worse, that he was going to just dismiss them one by one. You're gone, you're okay, or something like that. That didn't happen. But it was the next worst thing, which is it was totally unnecessary and embarrassing for the nation and for the rest of the world. So let me jump
Yeah,
from that. If
I,
you want
I
to make a
felt
comment, please.
I felt bad for the camp commander there at the Marine Corps Base
Oh,
Quantico. I mean, that poor guy, he and his staff must have been going crazy.
yeah.
And then, of course, when you find out that the president's coming as well at the last minute, that's decided or announced. And so just security alone for the poor camp commander, oh my gosh. And then all the other things associated with it. So, but kudos to them. They pulled it off, and at least all the admirals and generals and sergeants major and chief petty officers did their, uh, they acted exactly the way I think you and I would hope and expect, and that the way the American people would hope and expect.
Well, the base commander at Quantico is exactly the type of person I say that was probably having nightmares and not being able to sleep at night. So, but they did get through it. Let's get into the talk a little bit more. He did refocus the mission to Homeland Security. Unfortunately, it wasn't the type of Homeland Security that I think I and you would have liked. He actually focused, when I say he, I'm talking, I guess, about both Secretary Hegseth and President Trump. He refocused the main mission for the United States military to Homeland Security, specifically on the enemy within and practicing doing combat or defending against the enemy within on American cities. Again, my stomach did a few leaps. I had to take a few breaks, come back, and then watch it again. It's been said before, but I will say it. This is declaring war on the American people. You don't use the best military the world's ever seen to fight Americans in American cities, especially, you don't really need a reason, but especially since there's no existential danger. There's no national security reason to do this. Your thoughts on deploying active duty military to American cities?
So, as I listened to these speeches, I put myself in the shoes of one of the commanders sitting in there, and I think I would have been thinking, okay, first of all, I'm very uneasy with this because, I mean, there's a reason that we have posse comitatus law and that it's illegal for American military to be used in law enforcement. We have all the other agencies that are there to do that, people that are properly trained, although I would say it does look like ICE agents are not properly trained at law enforcement in a legal sense. But nonetheless, um, that's not the job of the U.S. military. And I also think that probably, I can't speak for any of the officers and sergeants major sitting there, but because of the way that we reinstate our oath or affirm our oath to the Constitution over and over and over at every reenlistment ceremony, at promotion ceremonies, and any other opportunity where you can do it, I think most people would have felt very uncomfortable. I would have felt very uncomfortable sitting there to hear talk about, basically Americans are the enemy within, and the idea of using cities as a training opportunity. I mean, uncomfortable is the uh, kindest way I could say it. I think they'd have to be thinking like, okay, they can't be serious about this, or I would have been thinking, um, I'm going to, as soon as I get back to my headquarters, I'm getting my judge advocate general, my staff judge advocate to come in and see me and lay out, okay, what's required, what might legal orders look like that we could receive to carry these things out. So I'd start preparing myself mentally for what happens if I get an order as a commander of X to go to Portland or Chicago or something like that. What are all the legal ramifications? Because I would want to be certain that if this was an illegal order, that I was prepared to say, Mr. Secretary, we cannot do that, or we're not going to do that. That is unlawful. And but I'd want to make sure I was correct. And then I also thought, how are they going to communicate all this, all the things they heard to their soldiers or their sailors, their Marines? Um, I mean, this is an important part of it. You've got to be able to communicate. And look, for the history of warfare, commanders have gotten terrible orders from higher before. So, it's not unusual that you get a policy that you really don't like or an order to do something that makes no sense. But if it's not unlawful, you have to do it. So, how can you push back? How can you say, I can accomplish what you want by doing this versus this, or are there other things that we can do? But to explain that to your troops in a way, and of course, I learned as a cadet and had it reinforced throughout my career, you have to issue orders in your own name. You can't go back to your troops and say, hey guys, sorry, this is a dog's breakfast, but we've been told we have to do this, and so therefore, that's absolutely the wrong way to do it. So I think those people sitting in that room would have had to figure out, how am I going to do this, whatever the particular thing is. The one that is the most concerning, of course, is the idea of military being used against our fellow citizens when it's not obvious that they really are the threat. I mean, you Probably all of your listeners have seen videos of Portland over the last few days. They just did the Portland Marathon. 12,000 people running through downtown Portland, not exactly a war zone, and various other pictures of people out on sidewalk. I mean, I don't think any serious people really believe that Portland today is a ravaged war zone and that therefore you got to send troops there. So I, I think that I'd be I, I'd be very surprised if most people sitting in that room were saying, "Hell yeah, time to go. Time we got to do this." I doubt that would have been the reaction.
Well, I mean, I think you echoed what almost, if not all of them were thinking, that as soon as I get back to my office, I'm going to call in my JAG and talk about this. Unfortunately, as you know, the Trump administration has been firing JAGs from the top down. So that commander may not even have a JAG anymore.
Yeah,
Or
that's a great point. That's
yeah.
that's a great point, and that was, I think, this was by design that all of the three top service judge advocates general were sent off, and then Department of Defense has been tasked to provide judge advocates, staff judge advocate officers to go to support, I think, Homeland Security with border cases. So, I mean, all of this, uh, it takes it seems and feels so inappropriate. And, no commander is bound to do what their judge advocate tells them. I mean, your judge advocate, just like your surgeon, is an advisor. Sir, ma'am, you could do this, but blah, blah, blah. Here are the issues. Here's the legal framework. Here's where we have a problem, on and on and on. I used them all the time for the full range of things. There's a reason we have judge advocates general on our staffs at every level of command. Um, and I was always grateful for them there, but I also always knew that ultimately I, as the commander, I would be responsible for it. If they advised me not to do something and I did it anyway, I paid the price. If it turns out that I was wrong and they were right, but if they said, "Sir, you can't do this," I'd say, "Well, okay, thanks for your advice, but I believe this is what we have to do." The best judge advocates were the ones that could say they understood what I was trying to accomplish, but they would help by saying, "If we do this, it's illegal, but a way to achieve the effect you want is by doing this." Those were the ones that helped you get to yes, not the ones who just automatically said, "No, you can't do that." That was not helpful.
Well, and of course, that, as you said, is part of the plan. They did away with the top JAGs right away. They're doing away with lower level JAGs and replacing them with what I call apparatchiks, people that will not push back and will say, "Well, this may be illegal, but we can come up with a way around this." And that's what I'm really, really afraid of. Let me move on because I know we don't have a lot of time today. I was also very discouraged a few weeks ago when I saw President Trump speaking at Fort Bragg, I believe it was, with many, many soldiers there, in what was essentially a rally, a political rally. And he was, of course, denigrating the Republicans, Biden, and doing what he usually does at his political rallies.
The
And many
Democrats,
of
the Democrats, you mean?
yeah, Democrats. I'm sorry. Yes, and all his political enemies, and of course, many of the soldiers, cheered him on. He just did the same thing with sailors and the Navy to celebrate the birthday of the Navy. And again, it was a political rally. My thought on this, and my question is, why? And I know why I think, but I want your opinion. Why didn't either the base commander or at least the unit commander step in at the risk of their career? I get it, and say, "Sir or ma'am, this is not allowed. You can't do this. This is not a political rally," or however they want to phrase it. Instead of letting the commander in chief turn a meeting with enlisted troops primarily into a political rally. I didn't see that anywhere.
Yeah. So at Fort Bragg back in June, it was right before the Army birthday. It was when the president was there. Of course, he had the Secretary of the Army with him there and various other Army leaders. And I was stunned and appalled when I saw video of what happened there. Soldiers cheering and laughing out at some of the things the president would say about, you know, making fun of Governor of Newsom of California, for example. And uh, and then, of course, when you start digging into it, you find out that they had offered any soldier that doesn't feel comfortable here, you can be excused. And they were trying to also be very selective about what troops would be seen in the picture. And then the most bizarre thing that's frankly is also illegal was that this MAGA hat shop thing popped up on posts. That's you can't sell merchandise like that unless you're inside the whole AFES, Army Air Force Exchange Service uh, contract. And so I asked about that, and the leadership there at Fort Bragg was caught by surprise by that pop up MAGA hat shop thing. That was not part of the plan, and I think that they also, I let's just say they should have known something like this was going to happen. General Milley, when he made his big apology after the whole incident last in Trump won, in the first Trump administration, when he walked with the president and he was in his camouflage uniform, and he said, I should have never been there. It was a mistake. And I should have known that I was going to get used like that. That that was important part of his apology. And so commanders now should know that the potential for this is happening. And I thought we had solved this when I saw how the admirals and generals behaved at Quantico. It's like, okay, everybody's got the message now. I imagine, but I don't know, that the chief of naval operations or others would have told their sailors, like, okay, look, it is entirely okay to cheer for the commander in chief. In fact, I've seen soldiers cheer for every president I've ever seen when they show up because it's, if you're a young sailor or a young private or a young officer and the president of the United States shows up at your base, your ship, your camp, wherever you're deployed, you think, man, what I'm doing must be really important. It's a good thing. And so for soldiers or sailors to cheer for the president is okay. The problem was when the civilian leadership turns it into a big political event going after their political opponents. Um, that's the fault of the politician who does that. And I was disappointed to see some of the reactions of sailors on some of the things that the president said. Uh, I don't know that we're ever going to be able to completely solve that if the senior political people involved don't care or disregard. I worked in Army Congressional Liaison, 3 different tours, and we always were mindful of and had to advise the members of Congress with whom we were working in different ways that they could never use an Army base or an Air Force base as a prop for their campaign. Even if it was in their state or their district, they could stand outside the post by the front gate where it would say Fort Bragg or Fort Sill or whatever, but they couldn't use that. They couldn't be on the base and then make a political campaign for that very reason. Unfortunately, the president and the secretary um, have done that now, and I don't imagine it's going to stop. So somewhere, the senior military leadership is going to have to say, we're not no, we're not going to allow it. We can't do it. It's not legal.
Couple of things, and then I know you've got to go. And I know millions feel the same way I do. I'm very disappointed about the lack of pushback. Forget about Congress, even forget about Democrats and Republicans. I'm talking about senior military leadership. I get why they don't do it, but it's unacceptable. We're at the point of losing our democracy. We really, really are. And to not push back about things that are absolutely illegal and against every oath that they took at this point, to me, is unacceptable. Having said
Yeah.
that,
Let,
I
let me let me
go
let
ahead.
me
No,
say
please, please.
um, I don't know. In fact, I do assume that people like the chairman or the CNO or the chief of the Army or the commandant of the Marine Corps and chief of the Air Force, that they are in fact pushing back properly behind closed doors. Mr. Secretary, we can't, this is not proper. You are really, and so my assumption is that the vast majority of them do that. And then they're probably told, thanks for your service. Yes, we are going to do this, or I'll control, something. But I would imagine that that's happening. The one that's more disappointing to me are the retired guys that have a lot more flexibility, especially at the four-star level. Um, those guys are, with a couple of exceptions, General Barry McCaffrey, General Wes Clark, a lot of others are not saying anything, and that's been disappointing to me. I mean, everybody has their own reasons, um, but to hear nothing is concerning.
I would love to go on with that. One last point, and then you've got to go. I know. The Insurrection Act. I believe we are within hours or best days of President Trump enacting the Insurrection Act. I really do. I pray that I'm wrong. I believe that if that happens, that all bets are off. I'm not going to say we're done, we're toast, but we're pretty much at the end of our democracy there. I don't know what will happen after that, if in fact it happens. Your thoughts on if and when the Insurrection Act is enacted, and what is going to be the response of the senior military leadership to enforce it?
Well, first of all, the leadership in the Congress needs to come out immediately and say this does not meet the definition of, or does not meet the criteria for Insurrection Act. Um, so the absence of congressional leadership on this is a big part of our problem. The courts, I mean, at some point, of course, there'll be lawsuits immediately, and at some level, some courts will attempt to do something, including the Supreme Court, perhaps. I hope so. They just came back in session this week. Um, so there will be some things that could happen. I'm reluctant to say it's the end of the democracy, but it will be a very, very dangerous time. And I would imagine, I can't speak for all the officers who are serving now, but if I were a three or four-star commander somewhere in the U.S., and I was told Insurrection Act, I mean, I would really have to do some soul searching about, um, am I able to carry out this order, which does not appear to be legal? I hope I would have the courage to say, I'm not going to do something that I know in my heart and legally is illegal. I learned as a cadet, Dave, way back in 1976, when I started at West Point. This was right after Vietnam. And so all the Lieutenant Calley, My Lai stuff was fresh in everybody's mind. And so we had it drilled into our heads that you cannot ever say, I was just following orders as an excuse for doing something illegal. And they even referred to it as the Nuremberg defense. And so for decades, it was drilled into my head, this Constitution that we support and defend, you cannot hide behind an illegal order to commit an illegal act. And so hopefully our senior leaders will be able to help prevent us from going that far.
My last comment is, Ben, you know that if any flag officer in the continental United States does agree to take action with an insurrection act that they know is totally illegal because there is no national security crisis, and they put us under martial law. If just one of those senior level commanders obeys that illegal order, we're in a world of shit. Excuse me, but it only takes one. And I believe we're very, very close to that. I don't really need a response to that. I don't want to put you on the spot any more than I have, but these are dark times. More than since we've started talking. Every day it gets worse, and I feel very uncomfortable. So, Ben, we'll do this again very soon, especially during these times. You take care and stay safe, and let's talk again soon.
Hey, thank you. I always enjoy it and I appreciate you make me think about things and I think your audience is lucky to have you.